Go ahead, call the police. That's exactly what I told this HOA Karen when she threatened to have us arrested for refusing to pay a ridiculous $500 fine. You should have seen the baffled expression on her face. She was fully expecting us to panic, plead, maybe even apologize. Instead, we practically invited law enforcement over. But here's what she didn't know: something quite unusual about our seemingly normal suburban household. If she had spent even 5 minutes digging into who we were, she'd have known better than to pick us as her next victims. What happened when those squad cars actually rolled up? Let's just say, it didn't go how she expected. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because Karen's about to experience the biggest shock of her life. Let me walk you through the day our quiet little life turned into one of the most satisfying confrontations I've ever seen. My name is Marcus Sterling. What began as a peaceful relocation to a quiet neighborhood quickly spiraled into something I'll never forget. You know that feeling when you think you've found your dream community, only to discover there's a viper in the grass. Ours wore designer pearls and clutched a clipboard like a badge. My family and I had just moved into the Maple Grove subdivision. After years in a high-pressure job, one I still can't say much about. It was time to slow down. Government contracting tends to take you to places and situations that most folks will thankfully never have to face. All I really wanted was to relax on the porch with a cold beer, watch my 11-year-old son Dylan cruise around on his bike, and help my wife Victoria heal from a nagging work injury. The house, it was everything we'd hoped for. Classic American dream: a white picket fence, 2-car garage, and neighbors who seemed to keep to themselves. Or so we thought. One Tuesday morning, I was outside watering our fresh lawn when I heard a voice behind me, too sweet, too rehearsed. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Hello there, welcome to the neighborhood. I turned to see a woman in her 50s, flawless blonde hair, polished smile that never reached her eyes. She was dressed like she had brunch plans at a luxury golf club, every detail screaming status and control. That clipboard she held might as well have been a sword. I'm Evelyn Blackwood, your HOA president. We need to talk about some compliance issues, she said. The word compliance hit every red flag in my brain. I've dealt with power-hungry bureaucrats before, and this lady was clearly on a mission to assert control. Before I could even offer a handshake or invite her to sit and chat, she dove into a monologue that sounded rehearsed. There's a $300 inspection charge, plus $200 for landscaping compliance. That brings your total to $500. I raised an eyebrow. $500, a broken bar for what, exactly? I've been around long enough to recognize a shakedown when I hear "oh yeah," and this had all the classic signs of someone trying to pull a fast one on the new family in town. Ma'am, I said calmly, I reviewed our deed and legal documents thoroughly before moving in. This property isn't under any HOA jurisdiction. We won't be paying. I kept my tone steady and composed, just as I was trained to handle tense situations. But I saw her demeanor change right in front of me. The sugary exterior vanished in seconds. Her smile dropped, her eyes turned cold. For the first time, I saw her true face, the one that belonged in every HOA horror story you've ever heard. You're making a serious mistake, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice now laced with threat. The neighborly act was officially over. What stood before me now was a manipulative bully who thought she could scare people into paying her fake fees. If you continue harassing my family with this nonsense, I'll report it to the authorities. That's your final warning, I said. Victoria was watching through the kitchen window. She could tell something was off by the way I stood angled slightly, guarding our front door. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, like she was burning my face into memory for some future vendetta. She stepped closer, maybe thinking intimidation would do the trick. We'll see about that, Mr. Sterling. We'll just see, she muttered before turning away. As she walked off, I saw her already dialing someone on her phone, no doubt thinking her next move would shut us down. What she didn't realize, she just picked the absolute worst family for this kind of scam. Once she left, I did exactly what anyone would do when they suspect shady behavior. I went inside and started digging. A quick online search of my name and address would show I'm a government contractor who frequently travels for work. Pretty standard, nothing flashy, just a working man providing for his wife and kid. But I knew exactly what Evelyn saw when she looked at that. Government job, that means he's got money. That's what she was thinking. He can pay these fake fees. What she didn't realize was that not all government contractors are the same. Later that evening, while working in my home office, I overheard her voice through the thin walls of whatever cheap rental she called home just a few houses away. I found a family that won't comply with HOA fees. Can you help me put some pressure on them? The voice that replied chilled me. Calm, controlled, professional, but in a cold, dangerous way. This wasn't just some nosy neighbor. How much are they worth? The Mono Vincenta sounded exactly like the type you'd expect to be in on a fake HOA scam. Government contractor, she said. Plenty of money, just needs a little push to fall in line. And that's what I knew. This situation was about to go from irritating to outright dangerous. This wasn't just petty neighborhood drama anymore. Evelyn wasn't after a few $100 as she was tied in with people who made their living off threats, coercion, and worse. And the very next morning proved just how right I was to be worried. When I stepped outside, I found our driveway vandalized with thick red spray paint. Pay up or else. Dylan had seen it first on his way to get his bike for school. He came racing back into the house, wide-eyed, confused, and scared, the kind of fear a kid should never feel in their own front yard. "Dad, why would someone write that?" he asked, voice trembling. "How do you explain to an 11-year-old that some people think fear is a shortcut to money, that some adults act like criminals in designer clothes?" I turned to Victoria. "She's escalating. This might get worse." She was already grabbing her phone. "Should we just call the cops and shut this down now?" she asked. But something told me this wasn't the final move in Evelyn's twisted game. It was just the beginning. "Let's see how far she's willing to go before we act. Document everything," I told her. What I didn't know was that, just moments before, Evelyn had made a call that would tip everything into chaos. But who had she called, and what did she ask them to do? Over the next few days, our peaceful life turned into a relentless psychological assault. I've dealt with dangerous individuals during my time in government work, but there was something uniquely infuriating about a middle-aged woman using fake power and shady enforcers to try to bully a family into submission. Each morning brought something new, and not in a good way. First, it was our car tires, all of them slashed. Every vehicle in our driveway had clean, precise cuts. Whoever did it took their time to ensure we couldn't go anywhere. Then came the mailbox smashed to pieces, likely with a bat, letters and bills scattered everywhere like some twisted celebration. But the eggs? That was the final straw. Dozens of them, hurled at every window of our home. And taped beneath one shattered pane, a note written in the same red marker from before. "Final warning, pay HOA fees." Victoria was pacing in the kitchen like a lioness ready to strike. That spark in her eyes, I knew it well as she was done playing nice. "They've threatened our child. This is it," she said. That's when I knew we needed to respond officially. No more waiting, but I still wanted to do this by the book. I picked up the phone and called someone I trusted, Detective Sullivan. He was one of the more level-headed officers I'd met during our earlier run-ins with the local police. "Detective, we've got a serious situation on our hands. The so-called HOA president Evelyn Blackwood is vandalizing our property and escalating threats." There was a pause, and then Sullivan's tone shifted. He recognized the name. "You're not the first to mention her. I'll have a word with her. She's been on our radar before." Less than an hour later, I watched his patrol car pull up outside Evelyn's home. Even from 3 doors down, I could hear her putting on her best show. "Officer, I'm just doing my duties. They're refusing to pay fees that everyone else in this community pays." Her voice had that same artificial sweetness she used on me the first day, but Sullivan wasn't buying it. "Ma'am," he said, loud enough for us to hear from our porch, "if I get one more complaint about you harassing this family, you'll be looking at criminal charges." I thought that would be enough. I hoped the threat of real consequences would finally put a stop to it. But I severely underestimated her. Just a few hours later, Evelyn was back on the phone, and this time, she wasn't whispering. "Vincent, the cops warned me about harassment. I need to escalate now." The voice on the other end was calm, measured, but it sent a chill down my spine. I knew the tone. I'd heard it in the field. It was the voice of someone who'd made a living doing illegal things professionally. "I'll send someone over. Let them know how serious this is. That's when I knew for certain, we weren't dealing with some delusional HOA president anymore. Evelyn had direct access to people whose job was intimidation, the real intimidation. The following afternoon, a black SUV pulled up outside while Dylan was shooting hoops in the driveway. Two men in dark suits sat inside, clearly watching the house. No effort to hide it. They weren't just random thugs. They were professionals, the kind who knew how to make a family feel unsafe without ever breaking the law. Dylan rushed inside, pale and shaking. "Mom, Dada, there are strange men outside watching USA Broken Bar and they're taking pictures." I looked out the window and immediately recognized the setup. Surveillance, intimidation, the works. She hired muscle, I told Victoria, who clenched her jaw in that familiar way that meant she was ready to fight. They just made their biggest mistake, dragging our family into this mess. Right as we sat down for dinner that evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find two men straight out of a crime film, expensive suits, cold expressions, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of making threats. "Mr. Sterling," one of them said, "Mrs. Blackwood wants her money, $1,000, now, or this gets very uncomfortable for your family." I kept my posture calm, voice steady, just like I was trained to. I stood my ground, calm but firm, the same way I've been trained to deal with hostile encounters. "I don't owe anyone anything. Now I'm going to ask you one time leave my property." One of the men stepped in a little closer, and I caught the overpowering mix of expensive cologne, stale cigarette smoke, and something unmistakably metallic, probably gun oil. "Nice family you got," he said with a smirk. "Would be a shame if something happened to them, a broken bar all over a minor disagreement." And that's when these amateurs made their biggest mistake. They threatened my family directly, clearly, and within earshot of multiple neighbors. What they didn't know was that I had mentally documented every word. I'd already started laying the groundwork for a federal case. "Are you making a threat against my family?" I asked evenly, though my voice carried the unmistakable warning of someone they should never have messed with. Something in my tone must have registered, but they were too deep into their scare tactics to back down now. Too arrogant to realize they weren't dealing with civilians. "We're just helping you understand the consequences of ignoring legitimate debts," one of them said, grinning like this was a joke. The look I gave him told him exactly how badly he'd miscalculated. After they left, Victoria and I sat down for one of those conversations of the kind you only have when your family's safety is being threatened by hardened criminals. "It's time to end this." "But we do it by the book," I told her. Later that evening, Dylana, still shaken, asked, "Why not just call the FBI?" I paused. "Daddy used to work closely with people in law enforcement. We'll handle it ourselves first." Meanwhile, Evelyn was celebrating. In her mind, the pressure she'd applied was working. "They're scared now," she whispered over the phone. "I'll collect tomorrow," Vincent's gravelly voice echoed back, cold and transactional. "Good. I need my money back." But Evelyn had no idea what kind of family she'd been harassing. She was about to learn, the hard way. And that's where you come in. Drop a comment and let Anna Dramanes know where are you watching from? Are you ready to see what happens when someone like Karen goes after the wrong family? By week's end, Evelyn was riding high on her delusion. She strutted up to our doorstep like a queen come to collect tribute, her expression smug and entitled. Gone was any trace of polite neighborliness or mention of HOA policies. This was straight-up extortion. Final notice. Mr. Sterling, $2,000. Today. No more delays, no more excuses. The amount had quadrupled since our first conversation. That alone told me everything I needed to know about how real these so-called fees were. "Ma'am, like I've told you more than once, we don't owe a dime to any HOA because no legitimate HOA exists for this neighborhood. We're done entertaining your demands." She bristled. Her voice jumped an octave. "You're ignoring this? I am the legally elected HOA president. I have the right." Victoria stepped in beside me, fire in her eyes. Her voice was cool, but lethal. "Then show us the official HOA charter. Show us the names of the board members. Show us the vote that put you in charge." For the first time, Evelyn's mask cracked. Just for a moment, her expression glitched like static on a broken screen, revealing the panic underneath. "The paperwork is currently being processed through the proper legal channels," she stammered. That hesitation told us everything. This entire operation was a lie. While Evelyn was standing there throwing empty threats, I was inside doing what I do best at digging, investigating, connecting the dots. A few calls to the right contacts and some well-placed database searches gave me a story that was as fascinating as it was criminal. There was no HOA registered for our neighborhood, not locally, not at the state level, and definitely not in any official records. But Evelyn's previous addresses revealed something even more damning. She'd lived in 4 different states over the last 12 years. Each time, she stayed just long enough, about 3 years before police reports started piling up involving HOA-related scams. Then, poof, she'd vanish, move to a new place, new victims, same playbook. She's not just some angry neighbor, I told Victoria, scrolling through the reports. She's a career scammer. This isn't her first rodeo. From that point forward, we documented everything. I set out to build a case so airtight that no defense attorney could poke a single hole in it. I installed surveillance cameras around our property, made sure every interaction, every word, every movement was captured from multiple angles. I began compiling a file of evidence so detailed and damning that any federal prosecutor would be eager to take it to court. Evelyn thought she was bullying a typical suburban family who'd eventually give in and pay up just to make the harassment stop. What she didn't know was that we'd spent years helping put people like her behind bars, people who thought intimidation and lies could get them easy money. At the same time, Vincent was growing impatient. It was clear he'd bankrolled Evelyn's last scam, and now he wanted a return. "You've got 3 days. Get my money from those people or I'll take care of it myself." Evelyn was desperate, and desperate people make the kind of reckless errors that prosecutors love. "I'll figure something out. They're going to pay, one way or another," she muttered. And figuring something out meant crossing a line with lies and deception. That's when things got interesting from my professional standpoint. I watched her from my office window as she staged a classic setup, faked bruises that looked like they were applied with cheap Halloween makeup, a hidden recorder shoved awkwardly into her purse, and a rehearsed speech she'd probably practiced in front of a mirror. The show began the next day, right on cue. "I'm giving you one last chance to pay these fees before I take serious legal action," she declared, her finger subtly pressing what I assumed was the record button in her pocket. "We're not paying because your demands are completely unlawful, and you have zero authority," I replied, calm and composed, exactly how I was trained to respond when I knew I was being recorded. But Evelyn had her lines memorized, and she stuck to the script, no matter how absurd it sounded. "Don't threaten me. I'm calling the police right now," she screamed, loud enough for most of the street to hear. I blinked at her, genuinely baffled by the sudden dramatic outburst. "I didn't threaten you," I said evenly. "Are you feeling okay? You'll regret ignoring the legal authority of this hoe," she shrieked before storming off like she'd just wrapped up an Oscar-worthy performance. Victoria and I exchanged glances, the kind that come from years of dealing with con artists who think they're far cleverer than they really are. "She just recorded that whole thing to create fake evidence," Victoria said, already thinking 3 moves ahead. Dylan had been watching through the window. He stepped over to us, a serious expression settling on his young face. "So, now that we know what she's planning, what do we do?" he asked. I looked at him, then at Victoria, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine smile forming. "We let her make the call," I said. "Let's see how this plays out. Because here's the thing about manufactured evidence, it only works when the people you're trying to fool don't know it's fakey, a broken bar, and don't have real evidence of their own. And here's the other thing about people like Evelyn, they always think they're the smartest one in the room, until they're outsmarted." That evening, right on schedule, the moment I'd predicted arrived. "I need the police right away," I heard her scream through our paper-thin neighborhood walls. "A family has been threatening me for weeks and I'm scared for my life." I could practically visualize her clinging to that phony recording, showing off her smeared makeup bruises, absolutely convinced she was about to secure the win of her criminal career. Evelyn truly believed she was about to shut us down for good. What she didn't realize was that she'd just set off a chain reaction that would tear her entire operation apart. The 911 call she made, It was a masterclass in fake panic, worthy of a standing ovation from any seasoned stage performer. I'll give credit where it's due. Evelyn sold it like her life depended on it. These people have been ignoring legal HOA fines for weeks, she told the dispatcher in a wavering voice, and when I tried to collect what they owe the neighborhood, the man threatened to tow a broken bar and handle me permanently. What she didn't know was that Anna Dramanest would be the one telling this story soon, because everything she did next only made our case stronger. Her voice trembled with just the right touch of fake fear. I could picture the dispatcher on the other end, trying to assess what kind of neighborhood crisis they were about to step into, weighing the urgency of the situation. "Ma'am, are you currently in physical danger?" asked the calm, composed voice of someone who had probably handled every flavor of neighbor feud you could imagine. "I believe so. They know where I live. Please send officers right away before something awful happens." Her voice cracked with such convincing distress that, if I hadn't known better, I might have believed her myself, but knowing her history and knowing the scam she just staged allowed me to view it through a different lens. This wasn't fear, it was a performance. Her last desperate attempt to weaponize law enforcement for her own agenda. What Evelyn didn't realize, and what made the whole thing even more poetical, was that her emergency call had gone straight to Detective Sullivan, the very same officer who had already warned her days earlier to stop harassing our family. Domestic disturbance at Maple Grove. Suspects, the Sterling family. I could just imagine Sullivan reading that alert, raising an eyebrow. Sterling had a government contractor who had reported the original harassment, the same family that filed a formal complaint supported by evidence, and now they were suddenly the aggressors. Even without knowing our full backgrounds, Sullivan's instincts had to be telling him something didn't add up. About 20 minutes after hearing Evelyn's theatrical outburst through our shared walls, my phone rang. I answered with the cool professionalism that came naturally after years of federal service. "Detective Sullivan, Mr. Sterling, I'm responding to a 911 call regarding serious threats your family allegedly made toward Mrs. Blackwood." His tone was formal, but I could hear the skepticism just beneath it. This wasn't his first case involving overblown neighborhood drama, and something in this one wasn't sitting right. "Detective, your timing couldn't be better. We have a lot to discuss when you arrive." "Sir, I need you to remain calm and cooperative during this investigation." "Absolutely, Detective. We'll be waiting." My calm response clearly reassured him. He was expecting chaos. What he got instead was confidence. Real confidence, the kind guilty people can't fake. While we waited, Victoria, Dylan, and I had a quick family huddle in the living room, our final prep for what was likely to become the most pivotal moment of the entire ordeal. "Ready for this?" Victoria asked, her eyes steady with the same focus I'd seen countless times during high-stakes operations from her own intelligence work. "As ready as we'll ever be," I replied. "Dylan, remember what we talked about. Stay calm, tell the full truth, and let Mom and me handle the rest." He was only 11. But he understood this wasn't just another grown-up problem. This moment would define how we lived in this neighborhood moving forward. "This ends today," Victoria said with quiet certainty, the kind that left no room for doubt. When Sullivan arrived, Evelyn was already outside, acting like she was running a full-blown crime scene investigation. Her eyes were misty, her hand shaking, and her voice hitched with every dramatic breath. "Officer, thank God you're here. These people have completely disregarded their HOA responsibilities, and when I tried to enforce the rules, they got hostily dangerous." She pointed toward our house like it was some kind of den of criminals, completely ignoring the harmless reality: a child's bike in the driveway, blooming flowers by the steps, and a cheerful welcome mat that read "Home Sweet Home." The image she was painting clashed so badly with the peaceful, domestic reality that anyone with Sullivan's background would have noticed the disconnect immediately. "Ma'am, can you clarify exactly what happened? What were the specific threats?" he asked, calm but direct. "I approached them to collect unpaid HOA dues they've been ignoring for weeks. The husband became aggressive. He said I'd be sorry if I didn't back off. I was just doing my job as president." Her lies rolled out so smoothly. It was clear she'd told this story of versions of Ida many times before. This wasn't her first con. She was a seasoned manipulator, probably with victims in more than one zip code. Then came the knock at our door. Sullivan's presence carried the weight of experience. He measured, professional, and observant. "Mr. Sterling, I need to talk to you about some serious accusations made against your family." I opened the door slowly, keeping my demeanor steady and welcoming. "Of course, Detective. Please come in. Make yourself comfortable." The calm in my tone and the contrast between our pleasant home and Evelyn's chaotic claims must have stood out sharply to Sullivan. "Sir, there are reports of direct threats made toward Mrs. Blackwood," he said. He was just following protocol, but his eyes told a different story. They were scanning, analyzing, questioning the version of events he'd been handed. "Detective, before we address those claims, I have something important to show you, something that will change how you view this situation entirely." My voice remained steady, trained to de-escalate, to lead the conversation without ever losing composure. Sullivan's brow lifted just slightly. This wasn't going the way most domestic calls did, and he knew it. "My family and I have been conducting an investigation of our own into Mrs. Blackwood's behavior." "What kind of investigation?" he asked, now fully alert, his instincts kicking in hard. The moment of clarity had begun. There was a moment of stillness before I reached into my wallet, fully aware that what I was about to reveal would flip the entire situation on its head. Marcus was calm, collected. He knew exactly what he was doing. Whatever he was about to show Detective Sullivan wasn't just going to change the narrative, it was going to shatter it. What could a quiet, unassuming government contractor possibly have that would transform everything? Drama-nest followers, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. What do you think Marcus is about to drop on the table? When I pulled out my wallet and flipped it open to display my official credentials, I saw Sullivan's entire demeanor shift in an instant. "Special Agent Marcus Sterling, FBI Financial Crimes Division." Sullivan's eyes widened, stunned, as if he'd just been hit with a bolt of lightning. He instinctively took a step back as the truth settled in. "Agent Sterling, why didn't you reveal this when the harassment first began?" It's remarkable how a badge, just a piece of metal and leather, can change everything. Suddenly, I wasn't just some concerned homeowner in a HOA dispute. I was a federal agent who had been working undercover, gathering evidence and building a case with meticulous precision. "I'm currently on administrative leave from active duty," I explained calmly, "and I wanted to handle this situation quietly without pulling in federal resources unnecessarily." But Mrs. Blackwood escalated this far beyond anything that resembles normal neighborhood conflict. Before Sullivan could respond, Victoria stepped forward, her presence just as steady. With a cool grace born from years of high-stakes operations, she presented her own credentials. "Agent Victoria Sterling, D. We've been documenting every act of harassment and criminal behavior committed against us." Sullivan looked absolutely floored. His assumptions, everything he thought he understood, were unraveling. "Both of you are federal agents. And you just let this woman target your family for weeks without stopping her?" You could almost see him rewinding every past interaction in his head, re-evaluating Evelyn's version of events through a new lens. It was all beginning to fall into place. "We weren't just waiting," I said. "We were collecting airtight evidence. What she's doing isn't just harassment, it's organized fraud across multiple jurisdictions." I began walking him through the evidence, orderly, detailed, undeniable. I could see Sullivan's confusion shift into clarity, then into respect. "Professional, measured respect. This isn't just a messy neighborhood issue. It's a federal case that's been unfolding right under your nose. Mrs. Blackwood," I continued, "is leading a multi-state fraud scheme. She targets families in suburban communities, pretending to be a legal authority, collecting fake fees, issuing false threats. We have banking records, multiple statements, and communication logs confirming she's extorted several households across state lines. We presented high-resolution video footage, clear as day, of her vandalizing our property at night. Then came the audio files, unmistakable recordings of her threatening our 11-year-old son. And beyond that, documented proof that she had hired known criminals with violent histories to intimidate us at home. With each new document, I could see Sullivan's respect grow and his shock deepen. What had started as a neighborhood nuisance was now exposing itself as a deeply layered criminal enterprise. From the staircase, Dylan had been quietly listening, taking it all in with an intensity far beyond his years. Then he stepped forward, phone in hand, his face set with resolve. "I got really clear photos of the men who came to scare us," he said. He handed his phone to Sullivan. The pictures were crystal clear faces, plates, even the suspicious bulges under their jackets that strongly suggested concealed weapons. Evelyn's hired muscle, caught in the act on federal property. "This crosses multiple state lines and links directly to known criminal networks," Sullivan muttered, his voice now carrying a different tone of anger, real anger. It was becoming clear that he had unknowingly been manipulated and used as a tool in a scam far bigger than he realized. Evelyn had dragged him into her web of deceit, and now he was seeing the full picture. Through the living room window, I spotted her pacing like a restless predator, checking her watch again and again. She was clearly confused. Why is this taking so long? In her mind, we should have already been in cuffs and dragged off in front of the neighbors while she played the role of triumphant victim. But instead, her plan was falling apart right in front of her. And this was only the beginning. She probably thought it was already over or had already started imagining how she'd spend the money she expected to extort from us once we were behind bars. She might have even told Vincent that she'd finally hit the jackpot to targets who wouldn't fight back, just roll over and pay. The smug excitement of her imagined victory must have been eating her alive as the seconds ticked by without any sign of the Sterling family being hauled away. When Detective Sullivan finally stepped outside with the three of us walking calmly by his side rather than in cuffs, Evelyn lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "There we go. Are you arresting them? They're going to jail, right? For threatening me?" she asked, nearly giddy. But instead of slapping cuffs on us, Sullivan turned toward her, his expression grim. Jaw set, and pulled out his own handcuffs. "That's the face of a man who's just realized he's been used by a master manipulator." "Ma'am," he said firmly, "you're under arrest for orchestrating fraudulent scams and filing multiple false police reports." The transformation on Evelyn's face was priceless. Elation instantly collapsed into confusion, then slid into pure panic as the realization hit. Her master plan had backfired in the worst possible way. "What? No, they're the criminals. They're the ones who threatened me. They refused to pay legitimate HOA fees," she shouted, pointing at us with desperate fury, as if accusing us could somehow undo what she'd done. That was when I knew it was time to end the charade for good. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said clearly, "you called the police on 2 federal agents who were actively investigating your criminal activities while you were issuing illegal demands." "Federal agents? No, you're lying. That's not true. You're just trying to twist everything." But Victoria was already holding up her badge, steady and professional as always. Years of dealing with people exactly like Evelyn had prepared her for this moment. "D and FBI," she said coldly. "You filed false reports against law enforcement in the middle of a federal investigation." The look on Evelyn's face when it finally sank in when the full weight of what she'd done landed was something I'll never forget. Her arrogance crumbled into visible dread. And then, as if scripted, Dylan stepped forward with the final blow. Calm and serious, he looked her straight in the eye. "Mrs. Evelyn, a broken bar, you just called the cops on yourself." Out of the mouths of babes, he'd captured the entire disaster in one brutal line, a single sentence that pierced right through the layers of denial she'd built around herself. "Thie's a broken bar, this can't be real," she stammered. "You're not important. You're nobodies. You're supposed to be easy targets, a broken bar." Her voice broke, cracking under the weight of the realization that she'd completely misjudged us from the start. "You picked the wrong family," I said, voice steady. "At the worst possible time, in the worst possible neighborhood." Her fake world of phony authority and power was disintegrating, just dust in the wind now, and she was about to face the full weight of justice for her years of deception and abuse. But this was only the beginning. How deep did her network go? What else had she hidden? The next few hours were like watching dominoes fall, every lie, every scam, every part of her operation collapsing one after another, while Evelyn sat cuffed and silent, trying to piece together how her perfect plan had turned into a federal takedown. Sullivan nodded solemnly. "This just turned into a federal case. She's been committing fraud and extortion across multiple state lines for years." "What about Vincent and his hired muscle?" I asked. "The FBI is on them now." he replied. They'll all be in custody before the sun sets. What had started as a supposed case of local harassment had just expanded into a federal probe with links to organized crime deeper than any of us had imagined when this all began. I want my lawyer. This is a trap. It's a setup, Evelyn screamed from the back of the squad car, but her cries meant nothing now. Everyone on the scene knew what she'd done and how long she'd been getting away with it. Ma'am, you committed multiple felonies, Sullivan said flatly, and you did it to federal agents doing their job. There's no trap here, just consequences. The thing about criminals like Evelyn, they never think the rules apply to them. They always believe they're smarter, above the law, right until the moment they're staring at a lengthy federal sentence. She'd spent years manipulating, threatening, and deceiving families, but in the end, she was outmatched by the very people she underestimated. It turned out to be everything I could have hoped for and far more than I ever imagined it when we first moved into what was supposed to be a peaceful suburban neighborhood. Agent Sterling, one neighbor said, Evelyn took $800 from us just last month. She claimed their lawn violated obscure HOA rules that, we later discovered, didn't even exist. Then the floodgates opened. One by one, neighbors began coming forward with similar stories of phony fees, made-up violations, and threats that pointed to a long-running, well-organized scam. Mrs. Peterson, who lived on the corner, had shelled out $300 for something Evelyn called a mailbox compliance fee, a rule that existed only in Evelyn's imagination. The young couple across the street were fined $500 for having unauthorized flower colors, supposedly in breach of non-existent landscaping policies. The elderly man next door had paid $200 after Evelyn cited him for a noise violation because of his lawnmower despite the fact he'd been using it during normal, approved hours. We're going to need official reports from everyone, I told them, both for local records and the federal investigation. You'll get your money back and compensation for everything she put you through. The collective sense of relief was powerful. These were people who had spent years under the grip of her fake authority and now realizing they'd been the victims of serious federal crimes. Watching them wake up from the fear, step into the light, and understand that justice was finally coming was nothing short of inspiring. Meanwhile, the investigation was rapidly expanding. My fellow agents were uncovering just how large this operation really was. Vincent Maroney, I said. Loan shark. He's been bankrolling Evelyn and supplying the muscle for her intimidation tactics. We need him and his crew in custody. By that evening, they were. The feds moved fast. Vincent's reaction was unforgettable. The moment he realized what had happened, the betrayal, the setup, it hit him all at once. This is all because of that crazy whole lady, he growled. She dragged the feds right into my business, didn't even tell me who she was messing with. Even a career criminal like Vincent knew better than to mess with federal agents. Evelyn had roped him into her schemes without the slightest understanding of the danger she was stirring up. Her incompetence and greed didn't just wreck her own racket, it brought down a network of enforcers, loan sharks, and fraudsters who'd been running undisturbed for years. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom as Evelyn stood before the judge, trying to explain herself. Her voice was shaky, her expression desperate. They planned this, she insisted. They moved into the neighborhood just to set me up. It was all a trap. The judge, who'd seen dozens of fraudsters just like her, was unmoved. Her public defender looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, flipping through a folder that outlined her crimes in painful detail: of fraud, false reports, wire transfers, intimidation, all of it recorded and confirmed. Ma'am, the lead agent said calmly, you carried out a deliberate, organized scam. They simply acted within the law to defend themselves and expose the truth. But they never told me they were agents. That's not fair, Evelyn protested, still clinging to some twisted version of reality where she was the real victim. They were off-duty federal agents, came the response. They were living in their own home. You targeted them regardless of who they were. That was the final nail in her defense. No more room to twist the story. No more fake authority to hide behind. The judge gave his verdict without hesitation: 8 years in federal prison, full restitution to every single victim, and a strong rebuke for her attempts to deflect blame. For the first time, It felt like real justice after months of watching her manipulate, threaten, and exploit people who had done nothing wrong except live in homes she decided to target. Soon, the local news picked up our story. From a quiet suburban conflict, it grew into a national headline, an example of how far scams can reach, and how deeply they can affect everyday families. But more importantly, it was a story of accountability. Local woman sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for scamming families with fake HOA fines in a 4-state scheme. The news reporter framed it like a massive, coordinated criminal conspiracy, and to be honest, once you saw the scale of what she'd done and how many families had suffered under her schemes, that description was completely accurate. But honestly, the most rewarding moment of this entire experience came 6 months later when we finally hosted a neighborhood barbecue. Everything had calmed down, and our lives had returned to the peaceful suburban rhythm we'd originally hoped for. "Thank you so much for stopping her," one neighbor said while flipping burgers on the grill. "We were all too scared to speak out. We really thought she had some kind of legal power over our homes." Kids ran safely across the yard, laughing and playing free from the fear and harassment they'd once faced from someone who only pretended to have control over their lives. "This is exactly what neighbors are supposed to do," I replied. "Stand up for one another when someone tries to exploit or bully our community." And I meant every word. This was what a real neighborhood was supposed to feel like, people supporting each other, not cowering under the shadow of a self-declared authority figure with fake rules and a twisted agenda. Dylan came running up, his expression unusually serious, the kind of look he got when thinking about life's bigger questions, even at just 11 years old. "Dad," he asked, "are you going back to your regular government job now that all this stuff is over?" "Yes," I smiled, "but we're not going anywhere. We're staying right here. This is home now." And it was. After everything we'd endured and overcome together, this neighborhood felt more like home than anywhere we'd lived before, even during all our years in government service. "No more HOA drama anytime soon, I hope," Victoria laughed, helping arrange tables for a block party we never could have dreamed of during Evelyn's reign of fake authority. Detective Sullivan stopped by that evening, off the clock for once, looking far more relaxed than he ever had during the investigation. "Well," he said with a grin, "if there's ever another home mess around here, at least I know exactly who to call." The smile on his face said it all. He'd enjoyed seeing real justice play out just as much as we had. In just a few months, total strangers had become trusted friends and neighbors who'd been through something unbelievable together and came out the other side stronger, closer, and more united. That's what real victory looks like. Good people rising together, wrongdoers facing real accountability, and a community that refused to stay silent in the face of intimidation. So that's the story of the most satisfying takedown of a corrupt HOA tyrant I've ever witnessed. 8 years in federal prison for someone who thought they could threaten and scam innocent families with made-up authority. If there's a lesson here, it's this: never underestimate the quiet family next door. You never really know who you're messing with. Sometimes, the most unassuming people have the most extraordinary stories behind them, and karma loves using that against bullies who don't do their homework. Evelyn made that mistake. She thought we were easy targets. What she found instead were federal agents ready to bring her whole criminal setup crashing down. And the most ironic part? She was the one who called the police on the very people who were about to arrest her. If watching this story of justice brought you even half the satisfaction it brought us, hit that like button and let Anna Drama Nest know you want more real stories where the bad guys finally get what's coming. Ever dealt with someone who thought they had power they didn't? Share your story in the comments, so we love hearing about bullies being put in their place. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned. Our next story is just as wild and just as satisfying. Until then, keep standing up to the fake power holders of the world. Still reading? You're one of us now. Subscribe to Anna Drama Nesta and get ready to binge like your group chat depends on it.